everybody, and welcome back to another episode of The Male Perspective. I am your host, Lana Reid, and today, on this day, I have with me a gentleman by the name of Kareem Chadly. He is the founder and executive director of Dad's Evoking Change, a nonprofit that was formed to assist low-income fathers navigate the child support, child custody system. And I'm so looking forward to hearing more about the wonderful work that he and his organization is doing. But first and foremost, as I always do, I take a quick moment to pause, say thank you to you for making time for me today. Time is a gift. Once we give it, we can't get it back. So I appreciate you setting aside the space in your day to sit down and chat with little old me. And with that, sir, welcome to the show.
I appreciate you, Lana. Definitely appreciate you, creating this space and creating opportunities for males to just, have a space to talk about themselves, to talk about what they're going through. It's much needed and definitely not enough of platforms out there. So salute to you and thank you for having me on today.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you so much. Well, like I mentioned in the opening, sir, we're going to talk a little bit about child support and child custody in American court system. And as I was getting prepared for today's show, I did some quick research and found out when it comes to this concept, this legal notion of child support and child custody, it's relatively new in American court systems. It was started in 1975 with some modifications in 88, but originally designed when a time in our history where divorce was becoming more prevalent, and it was set up so that a child could stay in the economic status that it was when the husband and wife, mother and father were together. And then some changes transpired. And I think most people, I'm hoping most people understand when it comes to court systems, like if you're going to a criminal court, if you're low income and a person of color, it's a hardship to go into court without any legal representation or proper resources. But I think a lot of people tend to be dismissive of family court. Oh, you'll be fine. You'll be okay. But really, what is the reality for a low-income father when it comes to family court? What are challenges is he facing?
Yeah, Lana, thank you. That's a great question. I think again, this systems and these systems were created in the early 70s at a time in our society where there was definitely there needed to be some structure behind, keeping families to a point where the kids don't suffer due to the relationship status of the parents, right? 2022, today's families look a lot differently. We're composed a lot differently. The roles of the parents, what I mean, are a little bit more fluid than maybe they used to be, and there's some changes. So we are working in a very outdated, if you will, model. Okay. Navigating the family courts as a Black or brown father was probably one of the most soul-crushing experiences I've ever been through. And there was not many people I felt as I was trying to navigate. In my specific situation, I was navigating the child support as well as the child custody systems, okay. Two separate systems that are not interlocked at all. So they're two different courtrooms and all. You spoke about family courts. One thing to mention is in family courts, there are no public defenders. So like in a civil court, if you are a low income person, you will get access to a public defender. They might not be the best lawyer. They might be overworked and underpaid, but you will have somebody there with you when you're sitting there next in the courtroom and listening to the judge. Family court, they do not have public defenders. So if you cannot afford or to retain legal counsel, you will be navigating that system by yourself. Wow. And that's where the problems came in for me. I at the time of navigating it, I felt to be, a pretty savvy person, had been a father a long time at that point when I finally ended up going into the system and thought that, for someone like me who had always been involved in my son's life and who had always been present above and beyond, so to speak, that it wouldn't be such a difficult process. But I quickly found out, again, there was not many people that looked at you and saw like, and took you for your word at like, this is who I am, this is what I've been doing. I felt more that I would have to prove who I was and what I was doing, rather than the benefit of the doubt being like, this young man, he obviously is on top of his game, he's always been involved. It was that I would say these things, people would hear me, but the attitude and the general feeling I got from folks from both systems, from child custody as well as child support, was that, I was just a deadbeat and I was lying, and everything that I, came in with was challenged essentially. And again, I had to prove it. So it's very tough to navigating. There's a lot of hurdles. There's a lot of gray areas that Black and brown fathers face as they're navigating the situation. And we'll talk about it, I'm sure, but I'm sure this is due to a lot of different factors. That's just me personally, what I felt navigating. And then in family court, it's kind of like traffic court. When you go in, you watch everyone's case play out until you're called to the front. So that's the way I felt. But also, as I was witnessing other fathers' experiences, up in front of the judge, sitting in the galley, I noticed a common theme, that a lot of fathers were just being put on child support, exorbitant, like child support amounts that you would have to make over 100,000, 150,000 just to be able to facilitate being in the Bay Area. Obviously, this is one of the the most expensive places to live in the country. So that's why I say over 100,000, because actually, there was a study that came out a few years ago. If you make under like 150,000, you're low income in the Bay Area. And so I just saw a lot of fathers being put on child support, but not getting consistent physical contact or visitations, quote unquote visitations with their children. And so that's what I saw navigating the family courts, for almost a year. I was in and out and just dealing with the situation at different levels. That was kind of my trajectory and feelings as I was navigating through. Not a lot of help. People didn't really seem receptive to hearing you out, validating your experiences and such. And it was more so that I had to prove everything beyond reasonable doubt. I couldn't just go in there and just say, hey, this is who I am and X, Y, Z. So that was my experience.
Wow. So your late son, you were struggling with the whole child support, child custody thing. So I'm trying to understand packages in my mind. A court system, or even a Joe Blow walking on the street, it seems just common sense, nonsensical. You have a boy child, you have a father. That's the combination should be in place. That's the more suitable combination. But court systems don't see it that way.
I can't speak to the court system, but I can speak to my experience, right? And I can speak to the experiences that I saw. I was in a very unique situation, as by the time I went to court, my son was already of legal age to decide where he wanted to live. He was already 14 years old. Me and his mom had co-parented very successfully for the majority of my son's life.
Okay.
I guess I could also preface it with that. We had an initial court when my son was like maybe a year and a half, 2. When we came out of that court date, we had a heart-to-heart and said, you know what, we don't want these people to be involved with our son. Okay. And so we got on the same page, and that was great. Fast forward, my son is about 13 and a half. His mom had remarried and was going through a divorce. And he was just at that age where I had always been the main disciplinary parent anyway, but the beginning of the teenage years were challenging for his mom as far as just keeping control.
Gotcha.
And so we both agreed for him to come live with me full time. So when I go to court, my son is actually living with me full time. He had been for a few months. He was at the legal age where he was legally able to give his thought about where he wanted to stay. And we had co-parented successfully for 14 years of his life. So it wasn't like I was just coming into the picture. Yeah. It wasn't anything like that. So I saw that even me coming in, and mind you, I'm coming in just asking for 50-50 custody on paper, because after our initial court date, the judge had assigned me just visitations. We never went back to court. So that's technically what the custody agreement was that I had visitations every other week. Again, it didn't matter for all those years because that's not actually what we did. We had our own agreement, and we did more of a 50-50 arrangement. So I saw that it was like it didn't really seem, it seemed more important for me to be put on child support than it did for me to physically be involved with my son's life, to answer directly to your question. So I found that
Wow.
it seemed like the judge, even though my son was currently living with me full time, they didn't want to give me joint custody on paper. It was like, now mind you, the other party, my ex-wife, had a lawyer, right? And so I'm without representation and they're with representation. So, you know, he knows how to he knows how to he knows how to navigate it to where I would always just be on the defense. I could never really ever go in and just state my case like, hey, my son's actually just living with me. They're garnishing my wages from child support is the only reason I even came to this court to get custody on on a paper, because they're garnishing my wages. And it seemed like there was some pushback. So every time I would go to court, the lawyer, I would just basically be deflecting a bunch of allegations. So I could never even get to the point. And so after, you know, you're hearing all these things that are untrue, you might become emotional and say, hey, Your Honor, this is not true. And as soon as you show a little bit of emotion, then they play on that.
Gotcha.
Oh, this is like, and
Gotcha.
then they do you like the angry black guy, right? They like, oh, well, you know, he's very emotional, he's unstable, XYZ. I mean, they were using things in court against me. Like, you know, I used to have my son do book reports on historically black figures that weren't in mainstream history books, like we didn't learn about. So like Marcus Garvey and like, you know, Malcolm X. I mean, think like we know about these people, but like they were using that against me in court and saying, you know, in Mr. Chadley's spare time, he teaches his son about Marcus Garvey. And I'm thinking like, well, that's a weird thing to use in court, like against, to show how I'm not fit to be a parent. But then I look at the judge, and the judge is looking with disgust on her face. You know, this white woman is looking at me like, Marcus Garvey, like, oh my
Wow.
God, like this is, now mind you, they were talking about me having my son do book reports. So
Get
it
out.
were things like that where it seemed like it was more important for the courts to just make sure that I was paying my child support, but never seeing my son physically. And so that's my experience. And when I went through and again, you know, my son was already living with me full time. It wasn't like I was making this heinous ask.
Yeah.
Even to down to the point where I had the text messages where we both said, you know, he's going to come live with me, and I mean, it was months of planning. It wasn't just like an overnight thing. Like this was highly documented, very easily you could see, you know, through text messages and stuff. So I just felt
Wow.
that my experience was, it was a lot of like just dodging allegations and trying to prove when I was already, like, all I had to do was like look at my son's school records, or like
Yeah.
look at the fact that he was, you know, succeeding in like not only school but extracurricular activities, like after school programs and things that I had him, you know, into. And so to me, it just seemed like a very easy thing, but it didn't seem like they were very receptive to hearing
Truly a
any
broken,
of those things.
truly a broken system. Truly a broken system. You said something, and I want to make sure I understood this correctly. They were more concerned with the child support element. Is it my understanding that when a child support order takes place, all that money is not going to the child? Like the courts get their cut off the top too as well?
So it's layered, right?
Okay.
Just in California recently, great news about that. Just in California recently, they just passed the 100% pass through. So now all of the money goes directly to the family. But this is just within the last couple of months. And we were a part of lobbying for that to change in California as well.
Okay.
Back when I was going through the courts, which was, you know, some years back, that was not the case. But that was only for families where the mother had received some type of government aid. So if it was WIC, food stamps, any type of government aid, as soon as the mother applies for that, then the first $50 of whatever the non-custodial parent is paying, in this case, non-custodial parent was me,
Okay.
I was paying $400. My ex-wife never was on any WIC or food stamps, so it was always 100% pass through in our case,
Okay.
right? But then the issue becomes, even in those circumstances, the issue becomes how child support gets funded. Child support gets funded from the feds, from the government, from the federal government. And guess how much Guess what dictates how much they receive or how much they don't receive? How many people are on child support, right? So if they have 1 million people on child support, the check is bigger. If they have 25,000, the check is smaller. So what is the main goal for them, right? Child support and child custody, because they are in cahoots. They are different systems, but they are in cahoots.
Okay.
What would be the only reason why it would be more important for me to put on child support? More important, even though there's statistics that we can go on and on and on about today, which all say that a father's physical involvement is actually the most important piece to that whole thing.
True.
It doesn't say a father needs to pay X amount of child support, because if that was true, right, we have many different countries across the world where people have a lot less, but does that mean their kids grow up any less loved or
True.
any less nurtured or any
True.
less of the energy and the love that they're given from their parents being able to receive that from both ends, the mother and the father? We see that the money factor can't be the most important
True.
thing. But in America, this is what they say. They say everything is done in the best interest of the child, but then they put the father and say, you get visitations every other weekend. Now, how do you bond with your child? Let's say it's a newborn. In my case, how are you going to bond with that child? You're not. The custodial parent is going to have the bond, and it's going to have ramifications throughout the child's life. Most of them are going to be negative, because again, we know that children need both the mom and the father. So to me, it wasn't my situation that it was like, oh, the government's taking on, because my ex was never on any of those systems. So that's great, right?
Yeah.
But here's where it got tricky with that situation with me. Around my son was 2, I told you we went to court when he was 1.5. When we came out, we had a heart-to-heart. We both cried to each other. We said, you know what? We don't want these people involved, because we both came from homes where our parents were fighting each other. And so we both said, you know what, that's it. And so shortly after, she dropped the child support, because it was like, why do I need to pay the child support? We can just do things together.
Yeah.
Why I have to pay? I'm not that guy. So she dropped the child support. Now, here's one of the first legal little tidbits that I'm going to say today. When someone drops a child support, if they don't say these words, I want to zero out the balance, they will stop collecting the child support, but they'll be secretly adding it up every month, every month, every month, every month. Now, in my case, from the time my son was 2 till he's 14, so 12 years, every month, they don't come after me. I don't have a child support order that's open, but they're adding it up, just keeping records. So when my son came to live with me, and he didn't want to go back and spend time with his mom, and I was caught in a situation where I was trying to get them therapy so that they can get back on the same page. And then she came in and talked crazy to the therapist, so the therapist didn't want to work with her. So after all these things were happening, she just called the child support agency. I want to reopen my child support case. And all of those 12 years instantly. So I had $50,000. I was in escrow trying to buy a house. And then the next day I had $50,000 on my credit.
Whoa.
And it's because she didn't, and that's when I learned, well, she didn't say I want to zero out the balance. So basically they just keep in tally. And if she ever reopens it, guess what? You owe all that money, but guess what else you owe, Lana? You owe 20% interest on that money too.
Get out.
So a bill that, like, because I came to court with all my checks, I came to court with that, like, this is clear, this is easily refutable, because the $50,000 was based on me never being a part of my son's life ever. And I was like, that's the most, like, this is the easiest thing to prove, right? So I go in with all my checks and stuff. But there was years, right, of during that 12 years where I wasn't giving her any money. I was just, the baseball is $500. She give the baseball association $250. I get the baseball $250.
Gotcha.
But that don't count because I didn't give it to her. So then they said, okay, well, you still owe $16,000 was the bill. $20,000 was the interest. So it went from $50,000 to $36,000 after I came in and proved that I had actually been involved. But it didn't matter because there was years that I didn't have any paper trail of checks going from me to her. Yeah. And not only that, every check that I brought had to say child support. Like if it said baseball, they would say, oh, this doesn't count. It wasn't child support. It was baseball.
Crushing.
So it was a very slippery slope. And so that's kind of how, like, the intricacy. So up until a few months ago, that was the big thing in California, was like, the custodial parent would get 50. They know the other parent is paying child support, but they're only getting $50. The other $350 is going to Uncle Sam because the custodial parent got WIC last year and got food stamps. So Uncle Sam is just taking the other $350. Now the custodial parent is looking at the other parent like, oh, you're really a deadbeat. I only get $50. You're supposed to pay $400. They don't even know that the government was actually taking that money. But that's like I said, now luckily that's been passed through, and so that's a great thing in California that they did. Still, just a chip off the iceberg, right? There's a lot more, but that was a good step in the right direction. So we're happy with that victory.
Okay, awesome. Now I got two questions listening to what you just said. Hopefully I can remember them. Hold on. Child support, my understanding is it never goes away. Like a guy takes that to his grave. So you could have a 90-year-old father sitting in an old folks home with his 70-year-old dad, and he still owes child support for that child?
Correct. Never goes away. Never. Now they just started having programs that are like, because they're realizing, well, there's a statistic out there that say like 80% of the child support is owed by fathers that make like way less below the poverty line, but the child support is always extra high. So it's like a thing you'll never be able to fully come from under that rock. It's going to be something. And then a lot of young fathers, and we work with those young fathers now and trying to get them the correct information, because a lot of fathers just get intimidated. They'll get a child support letter. They already have heard all the the horror stories about child support and dads and moms being favored, and so they just say, you know what, I just won't respond, and I will never have a job that I get paid, so they'll never find me. And that's like the 21-year-old dad, right? But then that same dad at 29, he realized like, oh, this is never going to stop. And it doesn't matter what state I go to. It doesn't matter where I go. They will always find me. And so I have fathers calling the hotline and calling us to receive help that, they're like 70 years old and all of their kids are way past grown and they're grandparents. And they still have this child support, and it will never go away. It never goes away. So that's one thing that I want to stress. And, I know it seems very stressful when you first receive, and even to deal with it, right? Like to go into the office and like, it's just it's very heavy for fathers to deal with because we've heard of all these negative stories, right? But I just want to say that's it's probably not the best way to handle the situation, because the child support will never go away. They will always find you. It will always come a time where you're going to have to face that. And so, I know a lot of young fathers that have taken that route, but I just want to stress that that's not always the right way. And as stressful as it is, and as hard as it is to go down to that child support and just talk to the caseworker, that's the best thing that you can do.
No.
And we could talk about that more as we go on, but that's the first thing that we need to really set straight, is that, that never goes away.
So, for the father who's out there trying to do the right thing, and you kind of explained some of this in your own journey, but you have this young father, and let's say he's working at a fast food restaurant and he's living in an apartment with two other guys so he can make the bills, and he's just on public transportation, but he's had this child with this woman, and he does what he can. He buys the diapers, he buys the formula, he spends time with his child. And when he goes down to court, he's showing the court like, this is all I have and this is what I make, or whatever. The courts don't see that and say, okay, he can only afford $10. He can only afford $20.
They should, Lana, they should take into consideration, like the things that they take into consideration when they're calculating how much child support should be paid needs to be revamped and looked at as well, right? Because what they really primarily look at right now is like the income of both parents. And then I just also want to lead with this way of thinking really makes it seem like, well, if you're not well off, then you can't be a parent. And this is the furthest thing from true. We know, I mean, the history of human beings, we've been having children in all different types of circumstances. Yes. And would it be great if both parents had a 5-bedroom home and the kid had 2 bedrooms, a playroom, and a library in the house? For sure, it would be great. But am I a bad father if I don't? Am I a bad, is the father that lives with two of his buddies, roommate, has one room, comes in, the child sleeps in the room with the dad and on a separate bed. Is that a bad father?
Not at
Should
all.
that father not get time with the kid because he doesn't have his own room? And
Oh,
so I want to challenge us to think like, what are we assuming makes us a good parent? Is it money? Is
not at
money
all. Not at
the
all.
only resource that we can have to be a good parent?
Mhm.
Because me being a parent, that was like the last thing that was really
Yes.
important. Because if for all those people that aren't spending time with their kids, people always say, oh, just go spend time with them, take them to the park. They always come up with all these things. Well, why can't I do that? I'm going to court fighting for my son. And you're telling me that my only contribution should be this money.
Mm.
So there seems to be a breakdown of what we actually want fathers to do and how we are judging a good parent versus an unfit parent, right?
Thank you.
Like, I don't think the guy that lives with his parent is unfit. An unfit parent is like maybe on drugs, or there's some abuse, or there's
Sure.
something. These things, for sure, we need to look at those things very seriously, right? But if we're just talking about because I live with two of my friends and my son doesn't have his own space, does that mean he should never spend the night at my house? I think that's kind of ridiculous to even think that way. So I think it's really time that we start like revamping the way that we even decide what is a good parent is what not, because
True.
it's not money. It can't be all money,
It
because we
can't.
have these rich kids that grow up and they're unhappy and on drugs.
Thank you.
They had all the money in the world. They had their own room and they had
Best
libraries and
trips, the best
whatever. Yeah,
schools, and everything.
the best schools. And that's another one, right? Whoever lives next to the best school. Now, of course, you always want your kid to go to a good school, right? But because I live next to a bad school, or a school that's not as good as the other parent, like, what does that mean? Does that mean my child
Yeah.
should never come to my house during the week?
Wow.
No, like that's really not that's not a great way to look at it. So I just think these things that are kind of hindrances for low income people to be parents, and it's like, oh, what are we saying, that low income people are bad parents because they don't make enough? Well,
Mm.
if you're going by the Bay Area standards, if you're not making 150, 200,000, you're low income. So are all those people making $97,000? Are they bad parents because they don't make 200? Like,
Yeah.
what are we associating with good
What's
parenting? So I just think we need to like really revamp the way that we look at that, and change the way that the systems is coming up with like who's the better parent because you have the extra room and the other parent doesn't.
Yeah. I mean, you would think that the end goal was to create a productive citizen in society.
Happy, healthy, productive member of society should be the goal.
Yeah, should be the goal. And that
Absolutely.
doesn't necessarily require finances. And then you kind of backtrack and you're like, okay, well, child support just started in 1975. So how were all these wonderful people being created before 1975? I mean,
It's amazing. It's mind-blowing. Like how and again, in 1975, like a guy could have 10 kids in California, move to Texas, and be gone forever.
Yes.
So I get it, right? I understand.
Yes.
I'm not like, why did they? No, I understand. This is it was needed, but like we're still going off of something we created 50 years ago.
Yes.
What else? What else do we do? That's 50. You know what I mean? Like, why? Why haven't we looked at this and said, okay, well, it's today's modern family. Also, back then, a mother was probably the primary caregiver, just by way of she couldn't get a job like the husband can get a job.
Yes.
Now, there are some disparities still in a lot of families. The woman is the breadwinner.
Today,
it's
yes.
not today in today's family. It could be either or both parents could be at work all the time.
Yeah, true that. It's amazing. I mean, just to listen to some of the stories and what we've got going on. I want to bring up a conversation I had with a young lady, and you kind of mentioned this. A conversation I had with a lady years ago, and she had a baby with a guy, and they were not together anytime afterwards, but she gave him accolades and kudos that he was a wonderful father. He was there financially, physically, emotionally. She had no complaints at all. But in the early years of the child, she was struggling financially, and she went and applied for food stamps and other social services. And that triggered them coming for him,
automatically.
you know? And she says she always regretted because that sent him on a financial downward spiral. So my question is, not only in these situations, but in other instances of child support orders, how much control does the mother have to say, hey, stop, I don't want to do this anymore? Or is this one of those things like once it's started, it's done? We can't do anything.
Once you go in the system, they are involved until the child is 18. Now, how much, it depends, right? Like I said, in my situation, particularly my ex-wife closed the child support case, right? Unbeknownst to me, she didn't zero out the balance. I didn't even know that that was a thing. So to me, it was closed. It's closed. So at that point, she had all the control. She had the control to say, I want to zero out the balance. And she had the control to say, I want to close this. Now, once she closes it, does that mean the father just doesn't participate financially? No, hopefully you guys have an arrangement and it continues. Just there's no one saying this, it has to be $335.50 every 2 weeks. It's just like you guys make up your own thing, right? So while the woman does have control, once a process is started, then sometimes there's not, right? So for instance, that mother, she didn't know that automatically just by her applying for WIC that it would trigger this. But this is well-known information, I hope now. Like we as a community and we as family, we have to stop inviting these people into our lives. Like, please come into tell us what to do with our kids, right? Because now we're in a thing where we've got so used to this that, you know, when I used to work with young people, I used to hear little girls talking like, oh girl, well, if you have a child and he don't act right or he don't want to be with you, just get him for everything. And this is the thing that, you know, young, or not even just young people, but people talk about. And on the other side of it, men are like, oh man, do you want to have a baby? I don't know if I want to have a baby. Why? Because this other person is really in control of the situation and controls our relationship, how much I can see this person and all of these things, right? So I feel like there is some power that the women have in certain situations, particularly as it pertains to the child support. If she applies for any type of social services, just understand that you are inviting the government into your family structure, and they will exercise any and every power that they can. And to me, there's some ulterior motives to keep Black and brown families separated, and the mom on welfare, and the dad can't even stay in the house because you have a stipend for housing. So if the dad is even seen, if your neighbors see this guy around too much, you lose your housing. So all of the like people make decisions, right? Even people that are getting along, they make decisions like, let's leave you off of the birth certificate.
Yes. Let's
leave you off of the school paperwork. And all of this is because I can at some point get these resources, and you know, Uncle Sam can take care of us. And so is it needed? Absolutely. Or were these social programs needed? Absolutely. So I'm not downplaying the fact that some folks really need this situation. I just want to make it clear that folks understand who you're inviting into in your living room and to the cookout. For the next
Thank you.
To the family cookout.
Function. Right. That's right. What's on the grill? I want some of that too. And I want some of that too. That's crazy. That is crazy. Yeah. Well, let me ask, child support and child custody. You mentioned that those are two different beasts, two different courtrooms.
Two different courtrooms. Yes, ma'am.
So usually I'm assuming that it's the child support court that the guy sees first before he takes on the child.
It can go either way. From my situation, it technically was. The second time around, like I said, when my son was 14, what sparked me going to custody court was because overnight I had $50,000 debt on my credit. Literally overnight. Like I went to sleep in escrow and I woke up with $50,000 debt. And so for me, it started there. Okay. You know? But sometimes it's the other way. Sometimes it's custody, and then in custody will then bleed over too, because after they set the custody, that splits up the time. And then the child support amount is based on finances, time splits, etc. So they're all intersected and they're all intertwined, and you could start your journey at either one. It's just different. It will be different for everybody, most likely.
Okay, gotcha.
Yeah.
So, sir, we're here in 2022, and you mentioned some of the legal changes that have taken place. But what else is on the horizon, or what are some things that need to be proposed? So this is more of a win-win for everybody.
From my vantage point, what I see and what we're fighting for here at Dads Evoking Change is that California be a mandatory 50-50 state. There are states that are already out there like it. Surprisingly, it's Arizona and Louisiana. I think we're the first two to adopt, and Arizona to adopt automatic 50-50. That means when parents walk into court, it don't matter who say what. It starts off at 50-50. Now, if there's other things uncovered like abuse or drugs or, the many things that can make someone unfit to be a parent, then they'll obviously go from there. But when you walk in, it does, like in California, when you walk in, there is no custody. There is no assumption of custody. We're waiting to hear who says what. If the mom say, "Oh, this guy's a deadbeat," and then the dad says, "Oh, well, this person's a deadbeat," and then they got to take who they gonna believe. I don't know. It can go different ways and different things, right? But in Arizona and Louisiana, it's an automatic 50-50. So that's one thing that needs to change. We need to change the way California deals with custody. It needs to be automatically 50-50. I shouldn't have to go in there and prove why I should be able to see my kid half the time. Like that's my given right. It's my human right as a father or a mother to participate in your child upbringing. Well, that's what they say anyway. Doesn't seem like a lot of fathers always have that right that's really exercised, because there's, like I said, there's a lot of hurdles and a lot of gray areas. Another thing that needs to change is how we are looking at what is being a fit parent. I think it's not fair to count finance in that. I don't think it's right. True. Because then we go through a situation where whoever's more financially inclined, they have the upper hand. It could be the father. The mother could have nothing. The father could have the 5-bedroom house. The father's going to get all the custody. That child still needs to spend time with his mom, even though his mom is low income. It doesn't matter. Like we're saying, low income people cannot provide love and care and affection and unconditional love and support. Why? That's ridiculous, right? So we need to change the way what we're doing to even calculate what is a good parent, right?
Gotcha.
And I think that we need to start creating more organizations like Dads Evoking Change that are helping fathers navigate the system. Because when you go into the courtroom, this is a different language being spoken. That's why lawyers go through 10 years of college and hundreds of thousands of dollars in tuition fees so they can learn the language of the law. As a regular citizen, I'm not going to know the language of the law. They either need to start being provided pro bono lawyers that will go in and help whoever, mothers and fathers, whoever doesn't have, they need to start allowing that, or they need to start creating with federal spending. They need to start creating organizations like Dads Evoking Change, who are our main focus is to help fathers through this process, because we realize that there are so many programs out there for women, which is great. Like that's our motto. That's what we look to. We look to how many programs and stuff do women have, and we want there to be just that many programs for men, because men who are actively trying to be involved in their kids' life have zero resources. Dads Evoking Change in the state of California is literally the first organization that has free legal resources, free co-parenting counseling for mothers and fathers. Mothers and fathers can contact us and get free co-parenting counseling, because we believe that once parents are given the chance to heal old traumas, which are usually very valid traumas, right? Heal old traumas, get on the same page and get to a point where they can really, truly, not just saying it in the courtroom, but truly be working for the child's best interest together as a team. We believe that's what we strongly believe, right? So we need to have more organizations. It's asinine that we are the only organization, and we just started in 2021. And we started because when I was navigating the child courts, I was looking for these organizations as a participant. I needed someone to give me a free consultation and tell me what I need to do. I needed someone to tell me, hey, this is going to be an emotional battle. When you go into court, you try to stick to the facts as much as possible, try to show the least amount of emotion. Like, I didn't have anyone to tell me these very simple things and simple steps that would have made my journey. Well, I don't know how it would have changed it, right? But I can assume that it would have been a lot less. One second, let me start the call. it would have been a lot less turmoil and me trying to figure out like which way to go. It would have been a lot less than that. And I could have got to the point where I just had these resources, right? So we need to be developing, and we also need to start looking at the realities that fathers are going through and stop with this deadbeat dad stereotype that we seem to put on. And that's a very, it's a gray area. That could be a gray area too, because I think that there are parents, mothers and fathers who maybe aren't as inclined to be there and be present, and like they don't have that drive, and that's fine. But there is a big cohort of fathers that are actually that, but there's these hurdles being placed in their life. And so when I first started the organization, I was actually a little worried about how much pushback I would get. And I think people understand in today's age, like people understand fathers have kind of had the short end of the stick in the last 20 years, so to speak, and that we kind of really need a change. When I talk to somebody about my organization, not one person says, "Oh, I don't know anybody going through that." That's quite the contrary. Everyone that I talk to from all walks of life, rich people, affluent people, people that aren't affluent, they say, "Oh, I know somebody who's going through that right now. I know this father who currently, because of the relationship status of him and the mom, they just are being excluded from the equation completely." And so I think these are some of the initial changes that we need to start. I think, starting with some systematic changes, starting with some program changes and what we're offering fathers, and then also just as a society, the way that we're looking at fathers and the way that we're pigeonholing a lot of our Black and brown fathers into being like people that don't care. That's played out because the statistics are there. If you want to know in 2022 what the father's role is, there's statistics, a lot of statistics out there that you can tap into that shows fathers nowadays and age are more participating at levels that they've never been involved in.
Especially Black and brown fathers.
Yes, ma'am. So, times have changed. We need to start letting go of some of these stereotypes that we've held, from our generation, even going back one generation to my father's generation. I don't feel like there was I'm not sure if we had gotten to the point where fathers were still like, no, I want to be in my kid's life. I think maybe we still were getting there, but now the majority of people I know who are fathers, they want to be involved. They are great dads. They're like the dads, like the playground dads who are in the playground with their kid. That was me. I was in the sand with my son. I wasn't just sitting on the sideline watching him play from the car on my phone. I'm in the sandbox with my son. All of the fathers I know, they're sandbox dad. They're in the sandbox. You know what I mean? Awesome. And so we need to, that needs to show in mainstream media, that needs to show in the music that we listen to, in the movies that we watch. We need to show these situations to change these stereotypes, because I think we've all been kind of, we've had that deadbeat dad fed to us for a long time. And there may have been a time where maybe that was it, but this is not that time. This is a new day. And fathers are here. We are present. We are active. We want to be involved. We want to spend, we want to bond with, you know what I mean? Like, this is what we want to do. Awesome. And so as a society, are we going to let fathers be fathers, or are we going to keep saying, if you don't make a certain amount of money, you're not really qualified to be a father? True. What are we going to do?
Awesome. I love it. And the work that you're doing is so needed, because so many times throughout the course of my life, be it friends or family members close to me, I've had situations where fathers are just weighed down emotionally with the struggle, to the point where they say, I can't do this. And I just got to wash my hands of it. So then the child or children lose the presence of their father, because the father has been so weighed down with the whole issue, so to have resources.
And then they'll call that dad a deadbeat when he's be like, oh, I can't no more.
I just can't do it.
And so I knew fathers like that when I was navigating. I knew fathers like that. I knew people that were coworkers, like, this woman made it so hard. I was just like, all right, forget it. And that was never my approach. But going back to my situation, I did get to that point. I had been going to court for 8 months. Mind you, my son still lived with me full time. He don't even barely see his mom, but I'm going to court like once every 2.5 months. I'm going back to court. And she telling me how much she talking about how much she just wants to see her son. But then I'm offering, hey, to take your son in, but she don't want outside of court. She's not saying that, only in court. So I eventually stopped going to court. I was like, well, they found out she was lying from child support, so they stopped taking my money. That was really the only thing that I was trying to do. I didn't care about having custody on paper because I never had custody on paper and I was always involved full time.
Okay.
So it didn't really matter. So I just stopped going. And that was a huge mistake, because that thing domino affected. Because I stopped going, they gave her full custody on paper. Once they did that, she's able to legally change his school. So she changed his school from the school that was around the corner from my house to the school around the corner from her house. And we lived about an hour away. She lived in San Ramon, I lived in Oakland. So I was driving my son to school. Eventually he started spending time with his mom, which I was happy to, that was great. But what she didn't tell me was she didn't necessarily have control of the situation. So when he come back, he doing what he want to do. He running out the house, leaving the house when he want to, middle of the night, he out with his friends, things like that. But she didn't tell me that was going on. One night he snuck out, wrong place at the wrong time, lost his life. Now, I know for a fact, if my son was at my house, those things would not have happened. There's not a doubt in my mind, like 110%. My son would, now he might have woke up the next day and got in a car wreck, I don't know. But he would not have been out in the situation on a school night where he didn't need to be. It just wouldn't have happened. So when I saw that, and I was telling the judge, he needs to be with me because they don't have control over there. Like he should definitely spend time with his mom and all that. But we're at the critical teenage years where a boy really needs his dad. I felt very equipped to deal with that age because for years, I had worked in the nonprofit sector, working with kids who were 15 to 18 years old, who had gotten in trouble with probation, and probation would assign them to an after-school program. I would be their mentor. I would be their teacher. So I felt very equipped to deal with this time in life. I had seen I had seen teens lose their life to gun violence. I had been to funerals. I had looked in the parents' eyes. I had felt that pain even before I felt the pain. I had experienced the pain. And then you can never imagine that pain as a parent. You can't imagine. There's nothing that can help you understand that pain. And so when my son got to that age, I felt very equipped to deal with this. My son was, again, I was the main disciplinary figure for his whole life. So I had a firm, he listened to me. There was none of that with me, but in the situation with his mom, and not to say she was a bad parent. She was not a bad parent.
She was just not equipped for that part.
Just that particular piece.
Yeah.
And that's why it's a team sport, parenting. You don't have to be equipped for everything. That's the thing. She took it more as, oh, he don't want to come live with me. So she started taking that on me because she was hurt, understandably. She was hurt because her son didn't want to come live with her. But she took that all on me and made it seem like I was a bad parent, to where the courts would force him to go back. And she did all that. And then 2 months later, my son, Pat, lost his life. And so, obviously that changed the trajectory of my life. Obviously that changed me. It changed me, and it changed what I wanted from life. It changed what how I felt about the world. I was a parent at 19, and, I never really experienced adult life without having a child. And so for me, it just made me feel like I was free falling, because I had nothing. Like nothing that I had in my adult life was there. And so so my son was always my home. That was where my home was, where he was, because and so losing that, it was just, the most soul crushing experience. And then so I really just was like, what can I do to keep my son's name alive? That's really how the nonprofit started. It was really just about, let me take something and put my son initials on it and keep it going in the physical realm. Now, my son was really into music production. I had taught him around the time he was 12, music production, like on a digital music production. And he had been playing live instruments since he was 5, so he could read and write music. So he really took to music production and really started like getting into it. So leading up, to when he was 17, from 12 to 17, it was all music. It was very music. I put him in programs. I got him, situated in that world. And so that was initially the thought of a nonprofit was, let me create something that has to do with music. And I after digging a little deeper, I just felt like there's something a little bit more meaningful I could probably do.
Yeah, yeah.
And then looking to my experience and seeing how I just felt so
Yes.
marginalized. I felt so unheard as a father navigating. I said, I want to create something that's going to help fathers navigate. I really didn't have the energy or the anything other than that idea. I created it. I applied for my nonprofit status. I registered my web domain. And then for a year, I just traveled. I left America. I just traveling. And that was a big part of my therapy, was
Gotcha.
getting outside and just being able to experience the world. And I'm very grateful for that opportunity, because it helped me get to a place where I could then, after that year, I came back, I ended up in Mexico. And when I got to Mexico, that was the first time I had really sat down with that pain and stuff. And so I had to really start doing
Mhm.
therapy and really start, working on mind, body, soul, and all that. But during that time, that's when I created the nonprofit. I said, okay, now I'm ready. Now,
Got it.
it'd been a year, and so, my emotions were still all over the place, but I was more in a stable place, and so that's when I really created the website. I flew back here several times in order to start forming my board. I didn't even have my nonprofit status at the time, but then January 2021, like I said, we got our nonprofit status. Immediately after that, I started applying for grants, and was successful initially in raising some seed funding. And so that was kind of the trajectory of why I created it. Obviously, this is my life work now. This is my passion. I don't really have aspiration. I was a radio personality for 9 years. That's what I thought my life was going to be. I thought I was just going to be a radio guy. I loved my job. And after that, and I barely could talk to myself, let alone talk to 500,000 people on the radio and give away these tickets and act like
Yeah.
I'm happy about it. I wasn't going to be able to do that anymore. So my
Yeah.
life changed. Everything that like I said, everything, all my plans that I had, I'm 41 years old now. I just turned 41. All my plans I've had, all of them went out the window. And so I was just really stuck in this place where it was like, this nonprofit really gave me a second lease on life, because once I really felt that I could help people, that gave
Mm.
me the will to keep going. Once I felt like if one keeps, like my son, it is that's an extreme situation that happened with my son. But there's a lot of smaller things that happen on a day-to-day basis where kids are being excluded from one parent, and they're growing up having to face the ramifications from that, whatever it be, emotional, psychologically,
Mhm.
all of these things together, these kids are having to face. And so if I can help one person, I said, that's what I'm gonna try to do. I'm just gonna help one person. And so my initial thing was, I gotta start free legal resource, because that's the main thing. I looked out there was a lot of fathers groups, or there were some fathers groups that, had like, a place for you to come and talk. And that's great. That's needed too. But when I was navigating the family course, that's the last thing I had time for, was a 6-week program where I'm just going to talk about my
Look, I
feelings.
got some
That's
issues.
great. That's great too, right? But like, how can I get custody of my son?
Y'all got a
Tell
court
me
date. I
that.
got a court date next week. Look, I
I
need
got a
some.
court date coming up. I'm stressed out. Please tell me what I need to do. How should I dress? How should I address the judge when I go into court? Is there something I should be like focusing on? Should I stay away from other topics? Like, tell me these
Yeah.
things. That's what I needed to. I didn't have time to talk about my feelings. And again, I want to stress that those things are highly
Valid. They're
important,
valid.
right? But these other resources are also equally, if not as more important, right?
Yes.
We have to give our fathers a fighting chance to go in there and achieve their goals. So fathers navigating this situation, they need hard resources today. And so that was why, even prior to really getting any funding, I was able to connect with a family law attorney. I was able to set up, a program with this family law attorney. I was paying out of the pocket. It didn't matter. Let's get it started.
Yes.
And
Yes.
I also had many volunteers that came in initially and was like, I'll lend my services. And so this really allowed me to, again, create programming before I even got any funding. It was really like people that I had worked with at other nonprofits, people that were in the world and understood the cause, fathers. One of my first board members was a brother that works at child support. He's a specialist. He's been there 25 years. And so really getting these key people on the initial team so we can create programming that folks need. All my program, I know it's needed, A, because I went through it. I know I needed it. But B, because I got a family law attorney on my board, and she tells me all of the things her clients need. and we can create programming based on these specific needs that she sees every day in the courtroom. And so it was really important for me to create an organization that, yeah, like we pass down hard skills and resources. We also have fathers groups where you can come talk to therapists and stuff like that and just get what's off your mind, because that's a big component of it too. A big component of it as well is fathers having a space to talk about it, because the wrong place to do that is the court. And that's usually the only place we have to go in and talk about it. So when we get to the court, we want to talk about how this person
pointing fingers at somebody.
And they don't want to hear none of that. And I never understood that. But this has this has repercussions about what we're talking about, but they don't want to hear any of that. So like giving these little bits of information, right? And so now I'm proud to say we have virtual. It started off because we started during the pandemic. So we started all virtual programming. But now we have our free legal consultations once a month virtually. And then once a week, we have drop-in hours here in Oakland. Fathers can come directly and sit down with a lawyer, get help with paperwork, get a game plan on what they need to do. And so this has been invaluable to fathers. You know, this has been something that fathers have been waiting for and have not had the opportunity to get these services outside of the family self-help centers, which every courtroom has a family self-help center. So everybody listening, that could be a resource for you. From my experience, it was very much like the DMV, like you would wait for 3 hours. And you get to the front and they're trying to rush you up out of there. They're not trying to take, they're not valid. They're not like, oh, I'm sorry, you're going to, they're none of those things. So when fathers come into us, what I really wanted to be adamant about was creating a space, working with people who understood the father's plight, who understood, you know what I mean? That this half of what we do is validating feelings. Because when a father comes in and he's hyped, he might've just came from court. Somebody told him he can't see his child, but every other weekend on visitations. So he already is like this. When I tell him, what are you here for? Oh, talk to me a little bit. Oh man, I'm sorry to hear you going through that, man. That can be very hard for you, man. And then you can see all of that and animosity. Because they like, wow, you understand what I'm going through? No one has told me that throughout this whole process. Nobody, right? And so it's the little things like that we want to make at Dad's Evoking Change. We want this to be a place for fathers. And so I'm very proud to say, yeah, we have drop-in consultations. That's once a week on Tuesdays. We have our co-parenting counseling that's going on. That's held virtually. Two parents that maybe not getting along, or just logistically, right? If two parents are in counseling, where's the kid? So we do that virtually, but we provide a space and free counseling services from Black and brown therapists that look like us and come from families like us. And we provide counseling and therapy to hopefully get folks to the point where they might not even need to go to court. Or if they do, like we can go to court with our own plan. The judge don't got to make all the decisions. If we go in there and say, Your Honor, this is what we agree of right here, then that's what they put on the order. But if people come in and they're disagreeing, that's when a judge says, oh, I'll make the decision. So again, as our families and our communities, we have to stop inviting these people into our cookout, into our family barbecues, into our family situations, and then being upset with the outcome.
With the outcome. That's true.
You know what I mean? Because we are inviting these people into our home. Now, do folks need services? Absolutely. Do sometimes it's needed that you go on WIC and housing? Absolutely. All those things are needed, right? But sometimes if we can avoid these situations and keep it self-contained as possible, let's get on the same page and let's try to work through our things. We can do it, right?
Yes.
Let's get on the same page. So our thing at Dad's Evoking Change is let's just provide all the resources for folks to do that.
Awesome.
And it's really as simple as that. So that's a big part of what we do. We also create media that really combats the deadbeat dad stereotype. So we just got through with our short form documentary, Reframing the Role of Black Fatherhood. Now we use that when we go into training, when we go train family law attorney judges, because we have been already contracted to do sensitivity trainings for the family law judges in Alameda County. We've been hired to do sensitivity trainings for these social service agencies that have primarily for the last 30 years only served moms. So we go in there and we show this video, and then it starts to humanize the father. You start to say, oh, wait
a minute.
I thought that all fathers really didn't care about being involved with their kid's life. I thought they were trying to avoid the responsibility. And then you see like this story about this guy crying, and he's saying like, no, man, I want to be involved. How come I can't be involved?
Yeah.
And so it starts to really debunk those myths, right? That all dads just don't want to be, and all dads are trying to escape their responsibility somehow. And so it starts to humanize these people and provide a different insight into what it really looks like on the ground navigating these situations as a father. So creating documentaries, creating even pieces for social media, right? We have a YouTube channel where I get lawyers to explain commonly asked questions in short form, right? So it's a 3-minute video explaining how to fill out this one form that's used every day in the courts, right? So we want to meet fathers where they are. We want to get the information to fathers where they are. A father shouldn't have to go to a 6-week program to on week 3 learn about co-parenting.
Yeah. No,
we should have the resources.
Let me stop you real quick. Because when it comes to court process, a lot of times you hear is this term mediation. The service that you provide, co-parenting, is that an automatic? I mean, do we do this first before we get to this next step? Do family courts do that?
So it hasn't been court mandated yet, but we will be soon. We're working with some judges in Alameda County right now. So right now, all the family law judges, they have our services, and they put the flyers in. Every father that comes to a family law court in Alameda County gets our flyers for our co-parenting therapy, as well as our free legal consultations. So that's the start. But moving forward is we want this to be a court mandated program. We want the therapy to be court mandated, even before mediation, right? Because mediation is a part of every custody. Usually has, I would say 95% of the time, you're going to go through mediation. And that's a great point that you also bring up, because I want to stress the importance to all those fathers out there that are listening. I want to stress the importance of mediation. When you go in there, it's like a job interview. You need to be on your best behavior, because the mediator has a direct line to the judge, and the judge usually takes what the mediator says as gospel.
Okay.
So if you go in there and you're argumentative in front of the mediator, and you're like attacking the other parent every chance you get, and like talking about all the problems between you guys, but not actually addressing what they're going to be like, oh, this guy is kind of like a hothead. He doesn't really, so that's kind of off subject. But when you're in mediation, because it's going to be a part of any child custody situation 95% of the time, you need to walk into that mediator room like this is they need to be your friend. The mediator needs to be your friend.
Okay.
So you need to be in there and really show and prove, and really make everything about the best interest of the child. Make everything as calm. You're calm. You and the other person are cool. No problems here. We need to figure out when I can see my son. And it can't really depend on if me and her are having arguments or not. So just things like that. So make sure that mediation is always a part of it. But hopefully moving forward here in Alameda County, our co-parenting therapy will be a court mandated. That's what we're working towards now. Because again, if you can do some type of counseling prior to even going to court, I would suggest that. Now, obviously, it's a financial thing. A lot of people don't have the resources to do it. That's why we offer it for free. But if you can, I would get engaged with some type of counseling prior, because you guys can work out a lot of things. And then when you go in front of the judge, you guys look like a team unit rather than two people that are fighting and really just want their best interests taken care of. So I highly suggest that.
And we are here, and I just want to make sure I am completely clear. We are here in 2022, and in California, Dad's Evoking Change is the first of its kind.
Yes, ma'am. And it's crazy to even think that. It's crazy to even think that. But again, I'm grateful for the opportunity. I'm up for it. Again, this has been my personal project. This is what I do.
Yeah.
Dad's Evoking Change has become my world now. It's become my baby now. This is what I pour my energy into. This is what I pour my love into. And so I feel very strongly about the cause and the mission. I know it's needed. And so I'm going to do my best, like I said, to affect some change and evoke some change. And I think that's what collectively, if we all come together and do that, that's the start of it anyway. You do
a beautiful way to give tribute to your son. Well, sir, I could talk to you for probably another hour or so, but I've taken up a large portion of your day. Let me do my random question, and then I will trouble you to tell us how we connect with you. And possibly you're in California, so maybe some other states want to pick your brain about how to get these services in their state and stuff like that. So let's do this, and then we'll see how we connect with you. Let's see what we've got. Random question here. If you had to give up your phone for a week, which app would you miss the most?
Ooh, that's a good one. That's a good one. At this point, I think it would be my QuickBooks payroll, because that's where I pay that's where I pay everybody, all my team. That's where I pay myself from, and that's where I keep my financial stuff. But just outside of work and just as a person, probably Instagram.
Got to get on the gram.
Probably Instagram. Yeah, and it's kind of for work, again, like for our business, we're heavily we post a lot of our resources online as well, because our big thing is like meeting filers where they are. But I'm not gonna lie, I'm checking DMs and
be
stuff
honest.
Too. So that's
be honest.
That's
be
real.
honest.
That's real. It would have to be IG.
Well, so tell us how we connect with you and keep up with what you and your team is doing. So just give us the whole lowdown.
Absolutely. So to start off, everyone can visit our website, dadsevokingchange.org. That's dadsevokingchange.org. We have all of our programming up there, all of our media that we create is always updated onto the website, all of our programming. So right now we have virtual free legal consultations. Awesome. This is available to anybody in the whole country. Awesome. So we have filers on there from New York, from Atlanta, from South Dakota, from Cincinnati, anywhere you are in the States. Feel free to join. That's once a month. We have our free drop in. If you are in the Oakland Bay Area, San Francisco Bay Area, we have our drop-in clinics. That's once a week on Tuesdays from 3 to 5. Again, all of this information is on the website, dadsevokingchange.org. We also have another virtual program that's open to everyone across the country. So mothers or fathers can hit us up about this. Our free co-parenting counseling, so where you get free access to a therapist who is able to provide sessions, 1-hour sessions for you. So that's also on our website, www.dadsevokingchange. Our socials are all Dads Evoking Change. So Instagram at Dads Evoking Change, Twitter at Dads Evoking Change, Facebook as well, Dads Evoking Change. Please connect with us. Send us a friend request. See how you can get involved with the movement. If you're a father, if you're not a father, we're always looking for volunteers. We are always looking for donations to continue to expand our programming. We've been so blessed in the recent couple months to be able to start holding programming in person. And our next goal is to start a physical center with wraparound services for fathers. And so that's coming soon. So keep up with everything Dads Evoking Change, www.dadsevokingchange.org. I look forward to hearing from everybody.
Awesome. Well, Mr. Chadly, from little old me, I am so very proud of you. So very proud of you. I'm so very proud of your team. I'm just in awe with everything that you are doing. Just keep being awesome and amazing from little old me, and just keep on doing it. Just keep on.
I appreciate it. And again, thank you for this platform, because again, it's much needed. There's definitely not enough platforms out there. So, what you're doing is groundbreaking. So salute to you, and appreciate you having me on today as well.
Awesome. That's all for this week's episode of The Male Perspective. I'm your host, Lana Reid, and I will see everybody next time. Oh.